All right, guys, this is our first class since we've been out of school. We're picking up where we left off. You have your syllabus and you see that section 5.2 is the next section we're supposed to cover. This will be a typical lesson that you'll be having for the rest of the school year. I will come in, I'll give you what section we're on, what problems we have, 5 through 9 odd, 13 through 17 odd, 23 through 25 odd, 27 through 31 odd. I will work one problem off of each of these sets of problems. You then will work as many of these as you can. And this will come to you on Monday morning after around noon or so. If you have questions, you need to put it back on your comments on this. Then I'll come back in and I'll work a few more problems that come in on comments and send it back out. We will repeat that process 3-4 times even if that's necessary. There will not be a quiz at the end of the lesson as there always has been in the past. There will only be one more grade taken. That will be the final exam. I have plenty of grades on you. I have plenty of homework grades we've taken up to this point, plenty of test grades to this point. So the only test that will be left will be the final exam. That will be taken in the first week of May. I'll probably, if things stay like they are now, I should be able to bring you in maybe 3-4 at a time and let you take the test in here. If that's not possible at that time, then we'll make whatever arrangements are necessary to make sure that you get an opportunity to perform at your best on this pre-cal class. Bottom line, when you finish this class, we should have you ready for calculus. You're going to learn what you need to learn, and you're going to get a good grade, and you're going to whip this problem that's going on. Academically, you're going to whip it. You take care of yourself when you're not here, when you're not working on this. Okay, let's start off. Again, we're going to do this. I'm going to pick one of the problems here in each part and work it for you, explain it to you. The first one I'm going to work is problem number 5a, sine of 7 pi 6. I'm going to take a minute, I'm going to look and make sure that the camera's focused like it should be. Okay, we're going to work 7 pi 6. Now, we've worked these in the past. When we worked it in the past, we had it in degrees. And instead of radians, it's actually easier to work in radians than it is degrees. But now then we have it in radians. Now, just as if it had been in degrees, we're going to write 7 pi 6 in terms of its reference angle. If I were to draw this thing, 7 pi 6, we know that pi is all the way here. We go 1/6 past that, so I rotate around. I've got 1 and 1/6 pi, so this thing right here would be 1/6 pi. That was a full pi. 1/6 pi further would put me pi 6. So in terms of the reference angle, this is sine of pi 6 n, and this would be quadrant 1, quadrant 2, quadrant 3, in quadrant 3. Now remember, just like when we were doing it in degrees, I want you to go ahead and put the quadrant you're in. If you look in the book, they're just going to give you the reference angle, pi 6. They're not going to tell you the quadrant. They just expect you to remember it. I'm going to do more than that. I want you to write where it is. So we're talking about pi 6 in 3. Now, in order to do this, we have 3 triangles memorized. You have memorized the 30, 60 degree right triangle, 1, 2, square root of 3. And when you memorize this, I had you to go ahead and memorize pi 6 and pi thirds. 30 degrees, pi 6, same thing. 60 degrees, pi thirds, the same thing. So if I say sine of pi 6, that's opposite over hypotenuse. That gives me 1/2. Now the question is that positive or is it negative? We all, as we were working in degrees, we memorized A, S, T, C. All students take calculus. In the third quadrant, we know that tan and cotan are positive. Tan and its reciprocal cotan are positive. Everything else is negative. Well, sine is the everything else. So we know that we have a negative answer there, and we've got negative 1/2 for our answer. Would have been the same thing if our reference angle had been 30 degrees and 3. Okay, let's do another problem. Now, by the way, when we memorized this triangle, we also memorized this triangle. The 45 degree right triangle, which is 1, 1, square root of 2. We know that 45 degrees is the same thing as pi fourths, like so. And so when you memorize the 45 degree right triangle, I had you to go ahead and memorize the pi fourths degree radian right triangle. Let's do another problem. Let's do number 13A. Cosine of negative pi thirds. Now, the first one we did, the angle was positive, and when it's positive, we rotate counterclockwise to get there. If it's negative, we rotate clockwise from the initial side. So we would rotate pi thirds in the negative direction, or otherwise clockwise. So we're trying to find the function, the trig function cosine of the angle pi thirds. So if we're doing that, I would end up writing it in terms of its reference angle. So that would be cosine of pi thirds n, and this would be 4. Now again, I know that in the books, most of the time, the book just says pi thirds, and it doesn't give the reference angle, even though you need the reference angle. I'm not going to let you get away with that in this class. You're going to end up and write it in terms of its reference angle. So we got cosine of pi thirds, and we got it in 4. Cosine of pi thirds, that's cosine of this right here, and cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. That would be 1/2. Cosine in the fourth quadrant, 1, 2, 3, 4. Cosine in the fourth quadrant, cosine is reciprocal positive, so the answer would be a positive 1/2. Now right now I'd like to ask for questions, and then we'd do whatever it took to get those answered. Can't do that now. Your questions will come in on comments, and you're going to try to have that back to me in a short period of time. After you've worked, don't just send me a question that you haven't worked on the problem. Work on the problem and then put it down and send it back to me. At this time, I want you to go and look at problem number 25. And what it's asking us there is to find the 6 trig functions of pi. So they're asking me to find sine of pi, cosine of pi, tan of pi, cosecant of pi, secant of pi, and cotan of pi. They're asking me to find those 6 functions. We've done a problem just like this, or problems just like this in the past. Only different was, instead of pi, they say 180 degrees. So this would be 180 degrees, but we would work and we would get the same answers. Now, we also talked about this before, and we know that there's at least 3, there are actually more than that, but there's 3 ways that we usually can consider to do this. One of them is just have the graph memorized and think about the graph in your head and write down the answer. I know that sine of pi, or sine of 180, is 0. I could write that from knowing the graph in my head. A lot of you can do that also. We can also do it on the unit circle, and all of us have done those before. This time, I'd like for you to do it with triangle, and we're going to draw a triangle that cannot be drawn. This is an abstraction. Abstraction is something you can see in your mind, but you can't actually represent with a physical representation. And when we do this, this is going this way for this point, so that's a -1. The hypotenuse is always 1, like in the unit circle. The side opposite of the angle is 0. Now I can't have 0 and have a triangle, but we're going to make it where we do. This is a right angle right here. So I'm going to go through these. I got sine of pi degrees. Sine is opposite over hypotenuse. Opposite is 0, and hypotenuse is 1, and 0 divided by 1 is 0. Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. Negative 1 over 1, and negative 1 divided by 1 is negative 1. Tan is opposite over adjacent. Opposite is 0. Adjacent is negative 1. 0 divided by anything is 0. Cosecant is opposite over hypotenuse, so I've got is hypotenuse over opposite, so I've got 1 over 0. Hypotenuse, opposite, 1 over 0, and that cannot be worked, can't divide by 0, so there is no answer. Secant, that would be hypotenuse over adjacent, that would be 1 over negative 1, which we know is negative 1. And cotan. Cotan is adjacent over opposite, which would be negative 1 over 0. Again, we cannot divide by 0, so the answer would be 0. Okay, again, at this stage of the game, I would like to take questions like we would in class. The only problem is that we're not in class, and I'm talking to nobody right now. Work on this stuff, send your questions back to me over the internet. Okay, let's work another problem. Okay, let's work problem number 27. They're asking me to find sine, cosine, and tan of the angle that has this on the terminal side. This is the end point on the terminal side. So we're talking about this point right here. And this point is negative 3/5, negative 4/5. That's telling me that the x value is negative 3/5 and that the y value is a negative 4/5. If I use the Pythagorean theorem, we know that this is always dropped to the x-axis to get the hypotenuse. I know that the hypotenuse is going to be the square root of negative 3/5 squared plus negative 4/5 squared. If I square this, a negative is going to be positive. So I got 3 squared, which is 9. I've got 5 squared, which is 25, plus I've got negative and negative again, which is positive. 4 squared is 16. 5 squared is 25. 9 and 16 is 25. 25 divided by 25 is 1. And the square root of 1 is 1. Therefore, I know that the hypotenuse is 1. Now, again, this right here is going back to like junior high math when we were learning how to do the Pythagorean theorem. So I've got this angle. Now, they're asking me to find sine, cosine, and tan. Sine, opposite over hypotenuse. Negative 4/5 over 1, which is negative 4/5. Anything divided by 1 is itself. Cosine, that is adjacent over hypotenuse, which would be a negative 3/5 over 1, which is negative 3/5. Tan is opposite over adjacent. So I've got negative 4/5 divided by negative 3/5. Now I realize a lot of you can do that in your head and you know the answer is 4/3. However, if you don't do it in your head, you don't see it immediately as 4/3, you know that this means negative 4/5 divided by a negative 3/5. And we learned back in elementary school that when we divide, we multiply by the reciprocal, like so. And when we do that, we see that the 5s would cancel out. Negative times negative is positive, and I get 4/3 for my answer. Now, a lot of you can see, okay, I know negative divided by negative, that's positive. I see that the 5s would cancel out. This is like 4 something divided by 3 or something, and I get 4/3. But I see that tan is equal to 4/3. Okay, guys, this is our first time through. You're going to work problems on this. The problems you can't work, you're going to make a note of it. You're going to put down the problem number. You're going to send that back to me. We'll go through this again. We may go through this 4 times before we finish the lesson. We will be on these problems for 2 days. Spend the time working on it. Now, guys, one other comment. Take care of yourself. Do what they're telling us to do. Stay at home. Stay out of big crowds. Try to make sure you keep your hands washed and use this sanitizer on your hands. Take care of yourself. Take care of yourself and take care of your family. We'll be talking to you and communicating to you for quite a bit in the near future. Have a good day.